bad things happen all the time, but something like that has like a little extra something to it. It's not just like bad things are happening. It's like, oh, we might actually be living in hell.
Hey, folks, welcome to Lights Out Mass, a podcast about government transparency or the lack thereof in Massachusetts. I'm Andrew Quemere, here with my co-host, Jeff Raymond.
How's it going, everyone?
And we're recording on Thursday, August 31st, 2023. And we're going to do something a little bit different this time. We're not really going to be focused on the whole transparency thing. We've just got a great guest today that we're going to talk to. We're here with Luke O'Neill. He is the author of the Welcome to Hell World newsletter. He's the author of two nonfiction books, Welcome to Hell World and Lockdown in Hell World. And his most recent book is a short story collection called A Creature Wanting Form. So, Luke, how's it going?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It's doing okay. It's a oddly chilly August day here, and what's been one of the mildest Augusts I can remember in a long time. And I think it's probably always going to be the case forever going forward, right? The weather's always going to be beautiful.
Yeah, it's actually a nice day, but so beyond the weather, you've been talking about some interesting stuff lately. There was one thing actually before we get into your current writing, there was something I wanted to ask you about. You used to write for DigBoston, right?
I did. That was my first. Oh, it wasn't my technically my first job in media, but it was, my first sort of real job in media. I after college I went and worked for Condé Nast for a couple of years, and then I came back to Boston to go to Emerson, and I was doing a master's, and I got a job as an editor at the Dig, and I decided to just quit my master's degree instead of turning in the thesis. And because I had made it as a writer, I got a twenty $20,000 a year job being the music editor of the Weekly Dig, as we called it back then.
Yeah, this is for people who aren't familiar. It's an alt weekly. It's one of those papers you'll see them on the side of the road. You grab it for free. And Luke, did you hear though that Dig recently stopped publication?
Wait, like even just the website?
Yeah. I don't think there was an announcement about it, but I spoke to one of the editors the other day, and yeah, it's stopped.
No, I hadn't heard that. I'm friends with Ferrone, the editor and publisher or whatever, but I didn't see him mention that online or anything. That's real shitty news, and obviously it's just a part of a huge trend for all the alt weeklies that have been dropping like flies over the past 10 years or so, however long it's been.
Yeah,
Any
yeah,
small outlets, really,
yeah.
because I was a small outlet writer for my hometown, and it got sold off to a IT company in New Jersey, and it's like, we don't have anybody on the ground here doing news anymore. It's unfortunate.
Yeah,
It's
and I did used to write for Dig on a freelance basis as well. Although there was one positive piece of this news, which is that the guys who were running Dig, they launched a new publication called Horizon Mass, horizonmass.news, and this is going to be a more student journalist driven publication from the announcement they put out, but still sad to see Dig go.
Yeah, I
For
almost
sure.
yeah, that's real sad news. And it was a huge part of my life for many years. I worked there in the office when it used to be on East Berkeley Street. Well, I started, it used to be on Kingston Street when I started, and it's just like little loft. And then we moved over to East Berkeley Street, and it was really thriving when I first started there. And then and then Boston Magazine, whatever the company is that owns Boston Magazine, and I think Philly Mag bought it. And yeah, I still remember the day that I got fired from the Dig. It was convenient because Foley's was right across the street, in both locations, actually, both different Foley's, two great iconic old Boston dive bars. And yeah, I remember Joe Cohane, who was a great editor and writer, and you guys probably know him. And he told me the news, and I was like, yeah, I probably had it coming.
I don't think I've ever heard this story before.
Yeah, it was Joe and Jeff Lawrence, and who used to own it. And no, but the truth was, yeah, I did have it coming. I used to like, I mean, this was, the early 2000s, and when you're in your 20s and you're in an office where there's, everyone's smoking weed everywhere, and there's a keg, and they used to do a little bit too much partying back there in the middle of the work day. So when you get fired from the office where everyone's high all the time, things going great,
Yeah.
But I obviously learned a lot, and everything, and then after, I worked for the Phoenix for a long time after that, and the Village Voice, and before, those both are dead now too, of course. But that alt weekly spirit, really informs what I do now with my reporting and writing for Hell World.
Yeah, it's been when I was writing for Dig, it was in the last it was more recently. It was since maybe 2015 or so that I've had work published there. And I don't know what your experience is, but what I thought was great about Dig was they looked for like really good journalism, factual reporting, but you're allowed to have like your own voice and to throw in like some opinions and, not just like sort of pull back and do the whole just the facts thing. Like it's,
that's
you had a voice at least, like you weren't just like the whole what do they call it, the view from nowhere kind of thing.
Right. And that's what I sort of when I started the Hell World newsletter, I guess maybe 5 or 6 years ago now, I had been, not to sound weird, but I'd been writing for a lot of prestigious publications and was kind of, climbing the ladder a little bit. But I always ended up butting heads with somebody along the way, and either got fired or quit from basically every job I ever had, and that, maybe I'm just a fucking asshole, I don't know, but part of it is that I just don't want to, do that sort of stuff, like I don't want to, I write this, I say this sort of thing a lot, but like, I don't want to go, when there's two parties to a situation, there's often one of them is the one that's abusing and harming the other. I don't want to go to that guy and be like, what was your motivation for poisoning the river, or like, how do you feel about the fact that you just mowed down all the protesters in a car? There are good guys and bad guys, we all became sophisticated somewhere along the way to think like the world is gray, but it's like very often it's not, very often it's black and white. And, you see this with the New York Times, like lately, and their insistence on covering the issue of transgender health as if, on one side, we have people that want to just live their lives and get the health care they need, and they're not bothering anybody. On the other side, we have fucking genocidal assholes. And you're like, oh, well, we have to hear from both sides in order to work in write a story for a mainstream newspaper. And that sort of thing, I don't know, I just don't want to do that. And, I was lucky to figure out a space where I wouldn't have to.
You were one of the first like newsletters that I remember like subscribing to in the post RSS era. So like for me, you were like a pioneer in this area.
Yeah.
So it's like, as somebody who's like a baby starting out in his little newsletter world, seeing how you've done it and how you've moved along from one place to another. It's like, I know you were on Substack when they started, getting everybody on Substack.
Yeah.
And, I know you shifted to Ghost, which is actually the platform I've been using. I'm kind of curious how that's worked out for you since that switch, because it's been about a year and a half now, right?
Yeah, like a year and a half or so. I was pretty early on Substack, and just be aware if I say anything that sounds like I'm, too full of myself. I'm fully aware of how awkward it is to, big up yourself. But I was pretty. I guess I was one of the early Substack success stories or whatever. Because I wasn't famous or anything. I had a modest following online and all that, but a lot of the people that came after me were sort of household journalism names, and they started making all this stupid money. But I managed to make a fine living off of it. And then the Substack guys just sort of revealed themselves as this weird brand of, Silicon Valley sort of dipping their toes into fashy shit. And I finally decided I had enough. Like, I feel like it's one thing to post on Twitter, which I still do, sadly, because I'm addicted to it. But it's another thing to like have my entire business and the place that I send out this stuff that I really care about and work on. It's different than a tweet. So yeah, I jumped over to Ghost, and it's been fine. Sort of growth is stagnated. Like Substack definitely has good like network effects, I think. And Ghost is sort of much lesser known and that sort of thing. But how have you found Ghost?
So far so good, but I mean, like my whole thing has really been I post things on Twitter, and I didn't have a fraction of the readership. I worked for a small town weekly, and it was a freelance 40 hours, 40 bucks a week, 950 words, 1,050 if you feel a little loquacious,
Right.
and so I'm approaching this now with statewide projects in a different kind of vein. And at the end of the day, it's like this is more of an excuse for me to do all the work I like to do, as opposed to if other people read it and get something out of it, that's an extra bonus. But this kind of scratches that itch for me and lets me explore stuff on the side while I work my real world job.
I do think go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I mean, go ahead, finish your thought. I was going to
say, I do think it's a fabulous model. The thing that, and again, what the fuck do I know? People do ask me for advice all the time about newsletter stuff. And I was like, I don't know, just, the couple of things just went the right way at the right time, and, but you do have to, there's two different ways. If you're just doing a newsletter and it's something you just want to do for yourself and you get a little bit of an audience, that's great. If you're trying to make a living at it, especially with actual reporting in journalism like you guys do, especially stuff that's kind of like,
labor intensive,
labor intensive and not firing off takes, that's, I mean, we all know that nobody wants to pay for, investigations into local officials and shit. They want to get a take on this fucking guy with the song, whatever it's called,
Oh yeah.
By the way, I don't understand why. When was the last time anyone talked about the #1 download on iTunes? Nobody, like, we're all supposed to say the problem. I'm giving a take on the guy.
Yeah. But so anyway, I mean, like, Luke, I'll just say, like, I do really enjoy your writing, and I think like the way you write is, if you just explain it like literally, like you write these long run-on sentences with no punctuation, it just sounds like, okay, what is this guy doing? But like when you actually read it like in context of all the stuff that's going on in the world, it's like you really capture this anxiety of like just existing in this world where we're constantly being barraged by all this like horrifying news, and we all feel so small and so like unable to affect any like meaningful change. And I mean, I guess like that's why you call it Hell World, right? But
right.
But
that's what it says on the tin.
Yeah. But I think that's also why your newsletter caught on, because you have this particular voice that is very it's really tuned into the zeitgeist, I think. But like, speaking of Hell World, what's going on in Hell World right now that people should be thinking about or should have anxiety about?
Well, tell us about the Richmond north of Brockton, Luke.
Yeah, right. Well, I grew up south of Brockton. I grew up in Kingston. Wait, I'm a good South Shore boy.
Yeah. Do they allow you back there now is the question, because
well, interestingly, I think Kingston did go for Biden this time around, but I'm pretty sure like it went for McCain versus Obama. Like it's weird. I don't know if you guys know that the South Shore, but it's pretty conservative.
It's more conservative, yeah.
And it's strange because I don't know if it was like that when I was growing up. I have no idea I think that was a shift because when I was growing up down there, was maybe like 10,000 people in the town. I think it's like gotten bigger, and probably all the houses have increased in value like 5 times or whatever. But yeah, that Massachusetts is, as you guys very well know, is a weird place in that, like, even when Trump gets like 35% here or whatever he got, like, it's a lot of people, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, there's a lot of fucking shitheads, and supposedly this
They're all
liberal,
in Worcester. Don't worry. It's
with this supposed liberal bastion, and meanwhile, half of our Democrats are conservatives. They just put D next to the name because they wouldn't get elected otherwise. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of these states, like New York and California and New Jersey, I guess, have this problem where you might have a trifecta, but half of your Democrats are reactionary dickheads. So like nothing gets done. But I don't know what had I been. I mean, I'm today. I did a sort of a weird piece with talking about a real catalog of bullshit that's going on. Like there's these, you've seen these flotation devices with the razor wires and the
Yeah.
saws on the border, and
Yeah, we're talking about Texas, Rio Grande, right?
right, and apparently those things are being constructed by prison labor in Texas. So that's like like that's the thing. I think that's like the hell world special sauce, like something that makes, like, all bad things happen all the time, but something like that has like a little extra something to it. It's not just like bad things are happening. It's like, oh, we might actually be living in hell, like prison.
are we the bad guys?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if you like Star Wars, but like that reminds me of, if you've seen the TV show Andor, where he gets like falsely arrested. He's put in like a prison, and he's like, they're forced to build like weapons for the Imperial war effort.
Oh,
It's
wow.
like, that's like the same thing, except it's real life.
Exactly. I didn't see that one. I don't. Obviously I like the Star Wars movies, but it's funny. Like, I feel like when I was a little boy, I maybe wished on a monkey's paw, and I was like, I wish there would be Star Wars movies every year for. And now look what they got. They're all kind of. Although I hear Andor was like the one that's like the best one of all
I
the.
liked it. It was pretty good.
That's right. It's kind of like, people are saying it was like kind of lefty, almost revolutionary,
A
right?
little bit. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. I thought it was like it's like a more darker, like grim look. But yeah, yeah, it's kind of like he gets into the rebellion and everything.
Yeah, I like that. And I just can't pay for another. I pay for so many fucking streaming services, man.
Yeah.
Another thing I liked today, was particularly hellworthy, was Nikki Haley saying that we need to raise the retirement age from, she said 65 is way too low, and meanwhile, for the second year in a row, the life expectancy in the United States dropped. So it's like now 76 years is our life expectancy, compared to around like 83, I think, for like, peer countries, richer countries. And it's been going down for a couple of years. Like all the other countries after COVID, like COVID obviously made things go down pretty much everywhere, but all those other countries, Japan and South Korea and Europe countries, they've all on the uptick, except us. They're still going down. So that's kind of like a nice intersection. Like, we need to raise the retirement age higher than 65, Republicans are saying. But meanwhile, we're going to die. We're going to work until we die at this rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like Haley, she's just trying to find something that'll stick, because that's just a vacuum in itself, that entire primary. And it's like, I was reading that when you put it in there, and I'm like, didn't France essentially set itself on fire for trying to lower the age 2 years or something like that?
Yeah,
it's like talk about the different culture shocks between the two, and it's crazy.
Yeah, we're a deeply diseased country, man. Things are not good.
Yeah.
It's not good. Yeah, but yeah, Haley, it's insane that it's going to be Trump, like, no matter what, they're all scrap, they're all.
You've already given up.
I mean, who else would have,
I know
DeSantis is,
DeSantis has fallen apart,
oh,
but
Well,
he's like a charisma void. Not that the rest of the lot are very fucking, charismatic, but God, that dude sucks.
yeah, but just the whole thing is like this massive train wreck. Like you can't look away. Like Trump going on trial at the same time that all this is happening. It's like made for TV. It's like just insane. Like
no, if
just
it was made for TV, they would send it back for rewrites
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
way too
exactly. It's like
unrealistic.
it's a little too on the nose, a little too contrived.
it is. It's really stupid. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I didn't watch the debate. I don't really care. I've been trying not. I haven't really watched much cable news in a while.
Yeah.
I turn it on if there's some sort of massive ecological disaster or a massive shooting of some kind, and I guess those happen pretty frequently. So this. So I take it back. I guess I do turn them on. But yeah, that is I don't know. I mean that's what we was joking about the weather to start off or whatever, but I have been sort of freaking out a little bit because that whole experience with the wildfire smoke kind of fucked me up.
Yeah.
The Canadian wildfires came down. There was like two separate weeks that it came down into, Massachusetts. And it's not like I'm not saying I didn't believe climate change is real. I mean, obviously I do. And obviously I knew it's going to affect us all in many different ways, but that was like the first time that it was weird in a way that scared me. Cause like, we get blizzards in Massachusetts, we get hurricanes every now and again, bad storms like that. We get heat, we get cold, but it never occurred to me like the entire air would be smoke that you can't breathe.
We're insulated from it up here to an extent because, I mean, if you've lived here your entire life, you're used to cold winters, you're going to get a few big snowstorms, and it's just, climate is just, if you don't like the weather, wait a minute. That's always the joke around here, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's I can't remember the last time it was that in our face about it. Like, I think I remember back when I was in college 20 something years ago, there was that wildfire that like turned the sky purple for 3 days, and that was like a big deal,
Yeah.
But this is, I mean, it kind of brought it all home in a really weird way. And
I mean, I think that like this stuff beyond the like obvious like physical and health effects it has, like there's like a psychological impact too. It's like who used to check the air quality before they went out? Now it's like I see it's like a cloudy day, I'll check the air just to make sure it's not like smoke, like
For sure. I look down on my stupid little weather app, like the second thing I check.
yeah.
we've gone from, is it allergies or COVID, to is it allergies or the air quality from the nation on fire to our north? It's
And I guess COVID is kind of surging again. It's like it's strange. Like I definitely, I got all my shots and everything, but then after that, I was like, oh fuck it, COVID's over. But apparently it's not. I don't know, and we just really the government just doesn't even care anymore. So I don't know what to tell you about that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like it's just, it's like, I mean, dude, you wrote this first Hell World book back, you published it in like 2019. I was just thinking the other day, I was like rereading the intro and I was like, man, like that was like just a few years ago. The world's gotten so much worse since then. Like this is already called Hell World. It's like, come on, man, like give us a fucking break. Like,
oh yeah, I remember the when we did the book launch for the book, and it was at for the first Welcome to Hell World book, and it was at the big room in the Strand, New York City. It's kind of this like place you kind of dream about doing a reading when you're an author. It was packed out, sold out. We had it was me and David Roth and Ashley Feinberg, two friends and great writers. We had a great chat and great reading, and I was like, I think it was January, right before COVID. I was like, man, this is going to be my year. Everything's turning up Luke right now, and then things really kind of slammed to a halt not too long after that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that basically I'm the main victim of COVID. That's the worst thing that happened, was my career being derailed.
So this new book is short fiction.
Yeah,
and so have you been writing a lot of short stuff in the past? Have you been published in other places, or is this just sort of a new avenue for you to explore?
Well, like I said, I went to, when I was mentioning I was at Emerson years ago, I was doing a MFA in writing and poetry, in fiction and poetry, and I always wanted to write short stories and poems. And even back then, this was like the early 2000s. Is hard. You could make a living as a journalist back then, and things very swiftly changed after that, a few years after that. But even back then, I knew, as much as you're not going to get rich as a journalist, you're never going to make a living as a poet. That's never been. So I just like, well, I want to be a writer. I'll go write journalism. So this is what I always originally wanted to do, and I just waited like 20 years before I went back to it for some reason. I guess I had a good relationship with my publisher, OR Books, and they wanted me to write another book, and I didn't want to do another, collection from the newsletter. So I thought, I don't know, maybe I'll try this, and then they really just sort of came flowing out of me pretty easily. So I was very happy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's the style is like the style you perfected working on the newsletter, though. I have to admit, I have not finished the book yet. I've gotten like a quarter of the way through it, but from what I've read, it's similar in a lot of ways to the kind of stuff you.
Yeah, totally. No, you're right. It is like that. It's basically the same style. It's just, and a lot of the same themes. Climate disasters and police shootings, and police violence and school shootings, and my general sort of malaise, and fear of mortality and all that sort of shit. But it's also, and this is important, it's also, from what I hear, everyone tells me, it's also funny. So, because, nobody wants to just read this sad sack bullshit without, having some sort of break,
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of just like what you've really nailed down is like this, like, just stream of consciousness that is talking about all this like horrific stuff, but somehow it like just ends up being funny or weird or whatever,
yeah, because that's the thing. And you said like something earlier about how it captures how we all sort of react to the world now, or something like that. But anyways, that's exactly the idea, because I personally spend so much time online now, and I'm sure you guys spend a lot of time. And
terminally, yep.
Yeah, terminally online, exactly.
Right. And it's like a deluge of, school shooting, flood, basketball highlight, school shooting, dick joke, and like that's how, like that's, it's like when you're scrolling, that's what it is, and that's sort of how my brain is wired, and that we're processing all of these things at the same time. Like I still follow a lot of funny people online, and we all tell jokes and goof around and stuff, but it's really in the midst of that, the most horrible things you've ever seen are happening on the same platform. So I don't know, that's really sort of changed the way I think, and that's what I kind of try to capture with the writing.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is very boring to anyone who's never heard of me. We can talk about the Patriots' chances.
Well, is there? So
speaking of Hell World, right?
These short stories are like they're like really short. Like they're often like a couple pages long or less. Is there like a particular one that you want to read? Maybe.
Oh no. No, see, actually, the thing about that, and I do readings sometimes, but because of the run-on sentences and the no punctuation, I feel like they're not really meant to be read aloud, because it's kind of baked in that I want someone to go back and read a sentence over and over. Wait, what was that? It doesn't make sense. You sound like you're supposed to want to have clarity of your language and people to, just be able to breeze by it. But I kind of like want it to be like a speed bump situation. And so you have to go back and and read things over to get through them. So I know it wouldn't be good for me to read.
All right, fair enough.
Are there some authors you've been reading recently that you do recommend that you've really enjoyed that, you know, perhaps have influenced how you've approached this collection?
I mean, I think I don't know about recent ones. I think the two major influences that I talk about are Donald Bartleby, and who was a postmodernist short story writer from in like the 60s, 70s, and Virginia Woolf was a big influence as well. I don't read as much fiction right now as I would like to, which is like a stupid thing for writing fiction to say. But I really just kind of I think something happened around COVID where I just stopped being able to focus on reading books for a long time. And I haven't really, and this is a great job selling my book. I don't read. I don't know how to read, but
I don't like to read anymore. I don't know how to use punctuation. They can't be read aloud. Buy my book.
I'm telling you,
that's the blurb for the second run.
That is basically it, but it's somehow people like it. I
mean, look, we wouldn't have had you on the podcast if we thought it was dog shit. So
you are speaking some sort of truth on this, because I always bemoan the fact that Twitter seemed to kill the blog off. In the sense that it's nobody had the time or energy to read one long form thing as opposed to 50 short form things. All of which were laser focused into what you wanted to be. And it was I was so excited that the newsletter era started back up again. And it had the energy of blogs without, all the technological nonsense that went along with that. And it's even that now, it's we've hit the newsletter industrial complex that, doesn't want to de-establish itself, and I worry about that now collapsing.
Well, there's no jobs. I mean, a lot of these people don't want to be doing newsletters. They'd rather have a stable job with benefits and real hours and that sort of thing. But those are all going away, as we mentioned.
I mean, in some ways it is the gigification of journalism, where you have people doing this stuff. Wouldn't it be great if the local paper was still around, or a magazine or something,
Yeah, I know it. This isn't the ideal. I mean, it can be great for individuals who figure it out, but it's bad. The newsletter economy is bad, I think, for media in general, because, like we were saying earlier, all these all weeklies in these small town newspapers are all either just going out of business or being bought up by venture capital vampires and stripped for parts,
Yeah, I mean, just the number, I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but just what we've seen, it's just evident if you read the paper, in Massachusetts, all these Gannett-owned newspapers that have been bought up, and they've just been stripped down to the bone. They've barely got any people working in the newsrooms anymore. They get rid of they axe the copy desk, they've
design, they centralize the design one place. And it's really, I mean, the end result is things just becoming worse because, as you guys know, as you kind of try to uncover things that local officials don't want out there, if nobody's doing that, there used to be a little bit of a check on, not that there wasn't corruption, and not that if you weren't a powerful enough politician, you could just sort of steamroll the press anyways. But now there's these massive, news deserts throughout the country where nobody is going to the town meeting at all, not even one overworked asshole. It's just nobody's going. And even if they were, people aren't going to read it anyways, and certainly not going to pay for it.
Yeah, and it's the stuff that I've been working on, a lot of public records requests that just take forever to do anyway. And it's I'm doing this on my spare time. when I'm
Right.
not working my full-time job and I'm not, hanging out with my family and doing this, that, the other thing, I
Right.
mean, I'd probably be the best journalist in the world if this could be my full-time job, just by
Yeah.
virtue of the fact that I'd have time to do all the things I want to. But
Exactly.
when you see all this stuff collapsing, it's like, I can't even freelance it anymore because there's not enough outlets to do the freelance stuff and nobody's going to pay for it.
No, no,
What's the point?
unless it has something to do with something, big and scandal. Like nobody gives a shit about local town officials. People barely even nobody gives a shit about state senators, and that's where some of these real dickheads, like that's like where they cultivate the dickhead that becomes, that grows into these.
It's the dickhead garden. Yeah.
It is. That's where they learn, to be corrupt, and then all of a sudden they're on the national stage. It's like, where did this guy come from? Like,
or even when you think about it in terms of like very hyper local politics in Massachusetts, where you have a lot of town administrators and a lot of town managers who just bounce from one place to another as they get booted out of one spot, or have to resign under curious circumstances in one place and just get another job in another place because there's 350 towns but only 200 people who want to be a manager. It's terrible.
Same with police. They
God, yeah.
shuffled around. Like that story, Andrew, you worked at, what was that, Hadley police, or what was that guy who keeps getting shuffled around?
Oh, you're talking about the guy out in Berkshire County at Egremont, and he got bumped out of, or he resigned technically, but he was recommended to be terminated from Shirley, Massachusetts, and then he got a job out in Berkshire County in Egremont and got into some more hot water. Yeah,
that happens in so many of these like small town police departments. The guy will bash someone's head in and it'll either resign or, I mean, it's so impossible for cops to get in any kind of trouble in the first place. So imagine like how bad you must have been to actually get fired, and then they just shuffle off to the next place and nobody even knows. It's like the fucking Catholic Church out here,
Yeah, I mean, some of these towns are like so small that they're not going to support a local newspaper unless you have like a big like regional paper that is successful enough that it can kind of branch out into the surrounding area and sell some papers in those towns and get some reporters out there. Then it's like there is no check. It's just like people do whatever they want, and there's nobody, there's going to be no consequences for them. There isn't even like that sense that maybe nobody can do anything about this, but I can't be publicly shamed. Like what? So why should I feel any shame at all?
Yeah, and that's sort of a Trumpy thing. I think he really showed the way for a lot of these guys that you just don't, you never apologize, never back down. There's no consequences. So
why own it if nobody is going to hold it to you anyway?
Right. Like, what are you going to do? You can't,
you're going to scold me. Okay.
Right. It's not like anyone on the right, they're not going to, impeach one of their own. They're not going to, get them in any trouble. I can't believe this dude Santos or whatever from, you have to be like comically corrupt to even face any consequences. And meanwhile, is anything even going to happen to the guy? He's like still.
I haven't followed that.
He hasn't gotten any consequences yet, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I don't really know. I haven't heard anything major. Was there some kind of investigation? I don't know.
No, I haven't been following it either, but I know that there's all sorts of. Every other time I turn around, there's some sort of
new bizarre story.
Yeah, suspicious money, going in and out of his campaign. So.
All right, so my last thing for you sent out a newsletter about a month ago about my favorite band in the world, R.E.M.
Oh, good.
and I gotta say that I have now created this new goal for myself where I get featured on somebody else's newsletter to talk about my favorite band. But I really loved that. I thought there were a lot of really interesting things in there. I'm kind of curious as to, first, like, what attracts you to that band? Because clearly you have a love for them the way that a lot of people do. But more, like, I find R.E.M. was one of the first bands that I knew of that were, like, really political. and really like had a point of view and weren't afraid to express it. And
Right.
that was like for a teenager, for a 13-year-old who was not listening to cool music at that point, because R.E.M. was not cool by that time.
Right.
That was cool to me. Even if I didn't agree with them. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of,
Well, yeah, I came to them. I certainly appreciated them as a political entity as well. And I have to wonder, like, we were talking about Kingston, where I grew up. Like, I often wonder how I grew up in a place like the South Shore of Massachusetts and wasn't like a homophobe or wasn't like a reaction, and I think that really was, and it sounds cliche to say now, but I think it really was because of Nirvana and R.E.M. Like Nirvana was pretty political too. It was less overt in the lyrics and everything. But the way Kurt Cobain talked about masculinity and that and all and stuff like that. And Michael Stipe, of course, was super overtly political. And I really do think I guess it must have been like just catching those two bands at the right time and it really having an effect on me, but R.E.M, I think I probably didn't come, I graduated in like the mid 90s in high school and I was listening, R.E.M was like my favorite band at the time. And it was just like this, wistfulness, lived in feeling that makes you feel kind of older than you were when you were a teenager, and especially a record like Automatic for the People, which has this sense of nostalgia and looking back on the past and that sort of woven throughout it. So I think that was what really appealed to me. And then, it's insane that and then I, went back to everything that came before when I wasn't, I was too young to pay attention. And it's basically just like a post-punk band for those first two records. And, really just ignited my love of music. I mean, they weren't the first band I loved, but they were probably like the most important, And
I go through it like every 9 months or so. I just like have a playlist of all my favorite songs, and it's like 14 hours long. And it's I find something new every single time that just like speaks to me, speaks to where I'm at. My mother passed away 5 years ago, and Sweetness Follows just absolutely just like grabbed my heart and would not let go.
Yeah,
and it's like that's the kind of band they are, and that's the kind of they make you feel things. And to bring it back around, what is this hell world thing all about? Because the world is making us feel things, right?
It really is. It really is. And I think we can all agree that my work is as important as R.E.M's to the world.
Yes, maybe more so.
Maybe more so.
But Luke, real quick, another music question for you. Rage Against the Machine or Audio Slave, if you had to pick.
Oh, geez. Now Rage Against the Machine, I'll tell you what, that was literally, well, okay, so I have this thing where I used to lie about what my first concert was because I thought it was dorky. So I would say my first concert was Lollapalooza in 93, and the first band that opened that day was Rage Against the Machine. And it was at some Air Force base in Rhode Island. I must have been, 14 years old or something like that. And they just blew my mind. Again, with the political stuff, they were also pretty important in my political awakening. The real first show later that I realized it was actually cool to say was Weird Al with the Monkees. And so that I didn't realize how cool that was until I became an adult. I was like, you know what, that's a very cool first concert. I love Chris Cornell. I've written about him on the blog, but
singer of Audio Slave for people who aren't familiar.
And they've got a bunch of great songs, but Rage Against the Machine for me.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
so Luke,
now
where
you're
can
on
people
record.
find you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on record as Rage or Audio Slave. Welcome to hellworld.com is the newsletter. Please sign up. It's kind of rambling and all over the place, like everything I've been saying here today. And my new book, A Creature Warning Form, is you can get it wherever you get your books online. But if you can get it at a local indie bookstore, call them up and ask them to buy it. That would be great.
All right, Luke. We definitely appreciate it. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks, guys. Nice talking to you. I'll
Yeah.
see you around, and
Awesome.
keep up the good work with the muck raking and so forth.
Appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye
Thank
now.
you.
Thanks. You've been listening to Lights Out Mass. I'm Andrew Quemere. I write the Mass Dump newsletter. That's andrewqmr.substack.com. That's where you can find this podcast. You can also find us on Apple and Spotify.
And I'm Jeff Raymond with the Mass Transparency Project in Bremenville Tribune, masstransparency.org, bremenvilletribune.com, or at Twitter, Jeff and Milbury.
Our theme music is Sunbleach by Lifeformed. You can find more music at Bandcamp. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.